What's good? It's Woog. Caleb Plant and Jermall Charlo are both set to return to the ring this Saturday. They're not going to be fighting each other. They're fighting much lesser opponents, at least on paper. I mean, they're both huge favorites to defeat Jose Resendiz if you're Caleb Plant and Thomas Cornflake Lamanna if you're Jermall Charlo. Now, although they are both mega favorites odds-wise, I'm talking Caleb Plant and Jermall Charlo, if there was one that I find much more vulnerable with many more question marks, it's obviously Jermall Charlo, the former 154-pound champ, former 160-pound WBC champ, who has fought once in the past 4 years and hasn't looked great in the ring since September of 2020 against Sergey Derevianchenko. And the last time he was in the ring, we saw Jermall Charlo's return against a blown up 147, really. I mean, Jose Benavidez Jr. is pretty much a big 147 who fought at 154 against Danny Garcia, who fought Jermall Charlo above 160. So we haven't really seen Jermall Charlo fight anybody who's truly a 168 guy. And, you know, to be fair, Thomas Lamanna himself was mostly a middleweight who recently went up to 168. And it's funny, Jermall Charlo, I used to see as being the better of the two Charlo brothers. This is when they were both down at 154. I thought Jermall Charlo had the better jab. I thought that he was the better round winner in terms of reliably winning rounds, whether you're knocking the guy down, out, or not. I saw Jermall Charlo as being a little more feast or famine. We saw multiple fights. I mean, he lost via decision to Tony Harrison, and he was losing on the cards when he stopped Tony Harrison in the rematch. But even before that, against John Jackson, he had a lot of difficulty. He lost some early rounds. But under the tutelage of Derrick James, I also saw more of an evolution over time with Jermall Charlo. Whereas when Jermall Charlo left 154, he basically wasted a big chunk of his career fighting nobodies at 160. It was pretty frustrating. Like, he would fight Hugo Centeno, Jorge Highland. Whereas at 154, at least he got a stoppage win over Julian J. Rock Williams, and he beat Austin Trout. He had a good, impressive campaign at 154, but it wasn't until like his sixth fight at 160 where he fought like a truly reputable, good opponent in Sergey Derevianchenko. And Jermall Charlo shined against Derevianchenko. He beat him more handedly than Daniel Jacobs or Triple G did at the time. Those were the only two guys at the time of Charlo versus Derevianchenko who had beaten Derevianchenko. I know he's lost a couple times since, but that was a meaningful win for Jermall Charlo. But again, that was the last that we saw of prime Jermall Charlo, and that was September of 2020. So I don't know what we're dealing with when it comes to Jermall Charlo. Again, he didn't look great against Jose Benavidez Jr. in 2023, and he didn't look that good against Juan Macias Montiel, who got stopped in the early rounds way back in the day against Jaime Munguia, and who more recently got dropped and stopped by Carlos Adames. Montiel actually pushed Jermall Charlo, and Jermall Charlo didn't really look impressive in that title defense in 2021. So again, I just haven't been impressed. Aside from that Derevianchenko fight, I was not satisfied at all with Jermall Charlo's campaign at 160. It just seemed like one missed opportunity after another. Some of that was due to promotional politics. At the end of the day, he should have been unifying some titles. And I know it takes two to tango, but I mean, damn, I mean, you're talking about wanting to build a legacy. You don't do that by fighting nobodies in a string of title defenses that nobody cares about. I mean, ask Gary Russell Jr. So here we are, 2025, and Jermall Charlo's fighting Thomas Cornflake Lamanna, who has a few losses. Like, you know, he's lost to Jorge Cota via stoppage in 2020. He got beat via unanimous decision by Brian Mendoza, who went on to knock out Sebastian Fundora and then to lose and get beaten up, you know, by Tim Tszyu, and then get beaten up even worse via decision against Sergey Bohachuk. But Brian Mendoza, pretty good fighter, beat Cornflake Lamanna, and then a few fights later for Lamanna, he got stopped in the first round. He got knocked out by Erislandy Lara, who's been catching a lot of people slipping in the early rounds at this elderly stage of Lara's career. Well, Cornflake Lamanna was one of those guys. But, you know, since that knockout to Lara, he has won about 8 fights in a row. So he does have some momentum. It's not against any great opponents, but one of the opponents was Juan Abreu, a pretty decent fighter. That was probably the best of the bunch. But Cornflake Lamanna does have some momentum coming into this fight against Jermall Charlo. I just fully expect Jermall Charlo, if he's anywhere near the Jermall Charlo that we've been used to seeing, even a slightly lesser version, should be able to handle Cornflake Lamanna. Now, will he be able to stop Lamanna? That's a whole other question. I seriously doubt, or have doubts, that we will ever see prime Jermall Charlo again. I just believe that when it comes to these elite fighters, which, look, Jermall Charlo does not have a Hall of Fame resume. Let's be clear. Even though he was a champ at 154 and 160, he does not have a Hall of Fame resume. Like, you could be a 4-division champ in some cases, like Adrian Broner or even Mikey Garcia, and still, in my view at least, not have a Hall of Fame resume. Hell, in the case of Josh Taylor, I'm about to do a video asking the question, is Josh Taylor a Hall of Famer? Is former undisputed champ Jermall Charlo a Hall of Famer? Jermall Charlo, I think, is much closer to the Hall of Fame than Jermall Charlo, but I have questions on whether either brother is a Hall of Famer. So Jermall Charlo, multiple division champion, but I do see him as having been, at least back in the day, a Hall of Fame talent, having Hall of Fame potential. You just have to string enough meaningful wins together to actually earn that. But I look at elite fighters as being such well-oiled machines that if anything disrupts whatever that recipe for success is, that the train can come completely off the tracks and never fully get back on track. I think that this might be what we're dealing with here with Jermall Charlo. I just don't see you taking that big a break, taking multiple multi-year breaks, and being able to pick up where you had left off in 2020. I just don't think that it works like that in 99% of the cases. So what version of Jermall Charlo will we get? Look, I think he's gonna beat Cornflake Lamanna, but in his mid-30s now, I think you have to have enough confidence in your gas tank and youth and legs to be able to push the issue in the second half of fights, where a lot of the knockouts come. And when you're in your late 20s, mid 20s, you've got the ability in most cases to put your foot on the gas and get that second half of the fight stoppage. I don't think that that's gonna happen with a 35-year-old Jermall Charlo. I think that if he's winning rounds, and he's gonna probably keep on winning rounds, we'll see if he fades late, but I think he's gonna beat Cornflake Lamanna via decision, probably unanimous decision. I think that he's good enough to where even a lesser version of himself should be able to win enough rounds to beat Cornflake Lamanna. Now with Caleb Plant, who they are obviously trying to angle for a fight against Jermall Charlo, look, I don't think Caleb Plant is a Hall of Famer either. He's a former IBF champ at 168, and I think that Jermall Charlo would struggle mightily if they do make that fight up at 168. Again, Jermall Charlo hasn't shown me anything in that fight against Jose Benavidez Jr. in terms of what he can handle at 168 against good 168-pound fighters. Caleb Plant, I don't see as being a Hall of Famer, IBF champ at 168, but he wasted a lot of time fighting Mike Lee, Vincent Feigenbutz, Caleb Truax between the time that he beat Jose Uzcategui and the time that he fought Canelo Alvarez. Now, Caleb Plant was one of these golden ticket holders where he just pretty much stayed put, handled his mandatories, because he knew that Canelo was storming the gates and that he would get that chance at the Canelo sweepstakes if he could hold on to that golden ticket in the form of one of the 4 belts at 168. So yeah, he wasted time. Now, was it worth it? Financially, sure. He made a ton of money, I'm sure, in that Canelo fight. So he probably doesn't have any regrets, but legacy-wise, you wasted a lot of time. I remember looking at the Ring magazine, or at least the Ring website, and seeing Zurdo Ramirez holding the WBO belt, Callum Smith holding the WBA belt, and David Benavidez at the time holding the WBC belt twice. Now, when Zurdo went up to 175 from 168, it was then Billy Joe Saunders who won the WBO belt. But all that to say, Caleb Plant didn't do any title unification at 168. So yeah, he was a IBF belt holder for 3 title defenses but does not have a Hall of Fame resume. He did try stepping it up against some of the elite guys. He got stopped in the 11th round after doing pretty well in the first few rounds against Canelo, and then 2 fights later after totally bodying Anthony Dirrell, old Anthony Dirrell, via vicious knockout in kind of a grudge match in October of 2022. Caleb Plant then fought David Benavidez. So props to him for stepping up to the plate, because a lot of people didn't want to fight David Benavidez, including Canelo Alvarez. Caleb Plant stepped up to the plate. He made it the distance, but it was only because he was holding on for dear life. That was a rough second half of the fight against Benavidez for Caleb Plant. So in terms of his best wins, I would say they came against Jose Uzcategui and Anthony Dirrell. Again, a much post-prime Anthony Dirrell, not the same Dirrell who fought David Benavidez several years prior. But that doesn't amount to a Hall of Fame resume. Again, props for having good efforts against Canelo and David Benavidez, but those guys are, well, Canelo's a surefire first ballot Hall of Famer, you know, one of the greatest of his era, right? But David Benavidez, I think, is really knocking on the door. Don't sleep on his resume. Even at this stage of his career, he beat a near prime Anthony Dirrell. He stopped Demetrius Andrade. He beat Caleb Plant. And even after that, up at 175, he's already beaten a former champ in Gvozdyk, and he's beaten a boogeyman, if you will, in David Morrell. The story's still being written on how good David Morrell's gonna get, but David Benavidez has beaten some champs, former champs, really good fighters already. So he's knocking on the door. But Caleb Plant, not so much the case. So the question is now, you know, Caleb Plant's made a lot of money in the game. I think he's trying to legacy build here. He's had one fight since that loss to Benavidez against Trevor McCumbee, which ended up being a pretty rough fight. Caleb Plant got dropped, but his experience, his class, ended up being the difference, and he stopped McCumbee in the 9th round. So, you know, Caleb Plant is a really good boxer, especially in the first half of fights. He's been known to fade against, at least against some of the better fighters in the second half of fights, but he's got underrated power, I think, in his left hand, especially in that left hook. He's got pretty good defense. He's only 32, so he's not that old, but a lot of his game relies on legs, so maybe he's probably gonna age out by the time he hits his mid-30s. But I do think that he's trying to legacy build, and if he can get a fight with Jermall Charlo, again, a multiple division champion, that is a meaningful name for Caleb Plant. And again, I would make him a heavy favorite against Jermall Charlo. I just haven't seen any evidence from Charlo that he could hang with Plant, or that he belongs in the ring with Plant right now in 2025 at 168. Now with Plant versus Resendiz, who kind of made a name stopping a way post-prime Jarrett Hurd. Jarrett Hurd had like a cut on his lip. They ended up stopping the fight. He then fought Elijah Garcia in a barn burner of a fight. That was go rewatch Elijah Garcia versus Jose Resendiz. Really good fight. Elijah Garcia ended up stopping Resendiz in the 8th round, and Resendiz has had one 6-round fight that he stopped in the 5th round, kind of a lesser, much lesser opponent. It was a 6-rounder, but that was Resendiz's only fight since getting stopped by Elijah Garcia. And Resendiz isn't a 168 guy. He's a 160 guy going up basically to fight Caleb Plant in the 12-rounder. So look, I don't think this is gonna go well for Resendiz. The question is, can Caleb Plant stop Resendiz? I think that he's got the power to do it, and I think that he's got the fortitude to do it. So unlike Jermall Charlo against Thomas Lamanna, I'm expecting Caleb Plant to get the knockout or stoppage against Resendiz here. I was gonna go Plant via decision because of, like, for instance, how he looked against Caleb Truax, where he was just kind of coasting. But you know, I suspect, and I remember Richard Dwyer saying that he suspects that Caleb Plant might have been battling like a hand issue or something like that, or he might have just been playing it safe because he knew that the Canelo fight would be next for him if he got past Caleb Truax. So maybe he was just playing it super conservatively. But Caleb Plant, when he sits on that left hand, it's a pretty devastating punch. So I think that he's probably going to stop Resendiz here. And again, if Caleb Plant versus Jermall Charlo happens, I mean, we've all seen that moment where in the press event of Errol Spence versus Terrence Crawford, Caleb Plant walked up to Jermall Charlo and slapped him hard with his left hand. It was like a left hook with an open hand. Like, he leaned into it, walked up to him, he set his feet, and he fired that left. You know, he put his waist into it, and then he hopped back into a boxing stance. And Jermall Charlo didn't look like he had any plans of any get back. Like, he looked like he was not ready for it. I don't know. He just seemed like he was very just docile. It was kind of weird. Like, I don't know if he was on medication. I don't know if he was, drunk. I don't know if he wasn't under any circumstances. And I only bring up chemicals because that has been a part of what's been plaguing Jermall Charlo in recent years. Domestic issues, wife or girlfriend, breakup, domestic issues, mental health issues that are admitted to and, documented. And even after this most recent fight against Jose Benavidez Jr. for Jermall Charlo, he got pulled over for drunk driving, DUI. He's been battling a lot lately, and I don't know what the deal was with him when he got slapped by Caleb Plant. Maybe he wasn't under any substances and just wasn't in a mood for confrontation. All these things are possible. All I know is Caleb Plant slapped the hell out of him, and Jermall Charlo kind of took it and kind of put his hands out or arms out, like, kind of what was that, and kind of, come on, man, and just kind of walked near the direction of Caleb Plant, but not in any hurry. It was really weird. So I don't know where Jermall Charlo is. I know what he's saying. He's basically saying, look, I'm taking boxing seriously again. I'm going to build a legacy. I want to be the champion. I want to really make up for this lost time. He's saying all the right things, but we hear fighters do this all the time, basically talking themselves into, hey, I'm as good as ever and I'm going to prove it to everybody. The question is, do you have the legs? Do you have the reflexes? Do you have those muscle memory movements that made you elite in the first place? Can he absorb a good punch at 168? Does his power carry at 168? How does he do in the second half of fights? We don't know anything about Jermall Charlo at 168, really. So we'll see how he does. Again, I'm picking him via decision against Lamanna, and I'm taking Caleb Plant via stoppage over Jose Resendiz. But yeah, let me know your thoughts on both Plant versus Resendiz and Jermall Charlo versus Thomas Lamanna. And let me know how you think Caleb Plant versus Jermall Charlo would play out. And do you agree that Caleb Plant, Jermall Charlo, maybe even Jermall Charlo are not Hall of Famers? And it might be a little bit unfair to say that about Jermall Charlo because, again, he became undisputed at 154. But unfortunately, it comes down to, well, who did you beat to become undisputed? Was it Jason Rosario, John Jackson, and Brian Castano in that rematch? I went to that fight. Great win, really good win for Jermall Charlo, but does your resume and who you beat? Because I think it comes down to two things when you're talking about Hall of Fame. Your accolades, like how many belts did you win in how many divisions, right? Like that type of thing. But also, who are the names on your resume? How meaningful in the history of boxing, how meaningful were those wins? Like, I really think that the difference for Timothy Bradley, I think that beating Pacquiao, I mean, he beat a lot of other good fighters, but it was really, I think, Pacquiao that put him over the top as a Hall of Famer. I mean, the moment Shane Mosley, after being a lightweight champion for some time, beating Oscar De La Hoya already pretty much put him at or near the Hall of Fame. So it's what you did, accomplishments and belts, how many divisions, but it's also who did you beat? So yeah, these are open questions for discussion. Let me know your thoughts on all this in the comments. Like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. I'm Woog. Thanks for tuning in.